Dystopia warning, obviously. Wow. Been an interesting few weeks, hasn't it? Yeah, interesting's doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. By interesting, I mean mad, chaotic, ugly, racist, and that's just Lee Anderson. But it also applies to Suella Braverman and Liz Truss, but why let Lee have all the fun? There's plenty to go round. Had a little bit of time recuperating, haven't I? Been preparing to the Conservatives in the next general election. I'm speaking metaphorically, obviously. Not today, MI5, no. Not today. Love and solidarity to all my fellow people that have found that, yes, yet again, they've woken up in the never-ending fever dream that is Tory Britain. Living in Tory Britain is a lot like living in that, mad, rubbish, immersive Willy Wonka experience, isn't it?
What is that? It's the unknown.
Except that rubbish Willy Wonka experience will probably have more of a turnout than the Conservatives will have. In fact, a nonce's funeral will have more attendees than the Conservative Party will have voters in the election. Yeah. I think we can all relate to this woman, can't we? I know I can. She's like me, going to the kitchen cupboard after another day of relentless Tory Omni scandals, making a concoction from the spirits that remain in my cupboards, only to create something that looks like Dignitas juice, Well, under this government it'd be called Indignitas juice, wouldn't it? Anyway, I'm going to start off with some good news, yeah, I know. And I'll tell you about all the things that have got on my tits. So the good news, and fair warning, this might give you a general erection. Whoa, look at the figures on that. A new poll created by Ipsos for the Evening Standard shows the Tories have dropped to just 20%. Their worst result since 1978 when the poll tracker started. Oh dear. Meanwhile, Labour are on 47%. They were even polling higher when Liz Truss was in charge, and I use that term loosely, and that mental waxwork tanked the economy. Dissatisfaction with the government, they're coming to get me for a thought crime, has hit 83%, up 5 points. This is starting to feel like a really shit version of Top of the Pops. Under the Conservatives, it would be Top of the Cocks. Down 6 points to 352 and completely out of the charts, we have 30p Lee Anderson for being a raging racist. Dropping 70 points to 105, we have Rishi Sunak for completely losing control of the cunt farm. And new in at number 1, we have Keir Starmer, who has attained the position just by not being demonstrably mental. I wonder what's causing this unpopularity. Could it be the recession, the rampant racism, the fact that nothing works, or the fact that your mum is having to sign up to Babe Station just to keep the lights on? Anyway, talking of cocks, Paul Scully has announced that he's stepping down at the next general election. He was recently involved in a scandal where he said areas of Tower Hamlets are no-go areas because Muslims are abusing their religion. What? He's one of about 50 Tory MPs that are legging it. They're like twats fleeing a sinking ship. In this case, the ship being the Conservative Party, which is akin to the Titanic, which they steered into the iceberg when distracted by noshing off their donors. Other architects of our downfall that are running away include Raab, Hancock, Nadine Dorris, basically all the people that contributed to, hundreds of thousands of people dying, millions ending up in poverty. Although Paul Scully stepping down did arguably give us one of the best clips that I've seen this year. You see how Paul Scully is marketing himself as some kind of electioneering super brain. In the process, apparently oblivious to him and him alone, he ended up calling his own party bellends. Look at the clip.
I just want to read your tweet from earlier. You said, if we just focus on the core vote, eventually that core shrinks to nothing. We can work with the bell curve or become the bellends. We need to make that decision. So you're saying the Conservatives are at risk of becoming the bellends. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, basically.
What the fuck? And then he ends up going on this mad ramble about swimming pools.
If I'm in this swimming pool and I'm trying to get people to come in, I'm not going to sit there in the deep end and say, come and join me. You stay in the shallow end, in the middle ground or something like that and say, let me explain why you should come with me.
Mate, no man, woman or child or animal would be safe with a Tory in a swimming pool. Also, the term at risk of becoming the bellends? I think it's pretty clear that they are by now, isn't it? Anyway, talking of bellends, Rishi Sunak did a speech, didn't he? Climbed his way up to the podium by stepladder in a random Friday night speech. And me, like the rest of Britain, was sitting there thinking, unless you're calling in a general election, mate, we don't give a solitary shit. What he did do was stoke division under the guise of trying to somehow promote unity, like an absolute psychopath. Talked of combating division and extremists, whilst increasing the risk of hate crimes against Muslims by painting entire crowds of protesters as extremists.
What a cunt.
It never goes well for governments to ignore massive protests, especially unpopular governments. People have a right to stand up for what they believe in and oppose in a democracy. Not that we have a democracy, because, you know, Murdoch chooses the next Prime Minister, doesn't he? We have a right to stand up for what we believe in, especially when, against our will, our taxes are being spent on weapons which are helping to kill children. Then he talked about democracy. He only got the job after 2 useless prime ministers resigned in scandal, and he was shoehorned in via a posh raffle of Conservative members from the remaining rejects in the leadership campaign. We're going to have our say. Yeah, they should count themselves lucky that this isn't France. If this was France, Westminster would have been ablaze a long time ago. This lot work solely in the interests of donors, hedge funders, and the press. We don't even factor into their decision making. It's precisely why Jeremy Hunt's putting 100 grand of his own money into trying to retain his position of power, because he'll make that back tenfold by lobbying for some of the most evil people on the planet. Talked about mob rule. Yeah, we are under mob rule. We've suffered 14 years of living under that shit posh mafia ring, masquerading as a Conservative government. This is about all of those people and the politicians retaining their grip on power. They can keep making money from our country's decline.
Wednesday might not be a vintage day. Maybe there won't be much fairy dust because the country's balance sheet was battered by COVID and then the conflict in Ukraine. So it will not be a moment when the Chancellor will have many tasty morsels to tempt you with.
Right, now it's time for the mad section. Truss, Braverman, 30p Lee.
And I don't actually believe that these Islamists have got control of our country, but what I do believe is they've got control of Khan and they've got control of London. And Khan, he's actually given our capital city away to his mates.
Let's start with 30p Lee, shall we? Guy that resembles Zig from Zig and Zag licking jizz off a nettle. A thick, basic opportunist who got lucky and turned up just as the Conservative barrel was being scraped. Tory party so unrecognisable that the old lot, who were evil, look normal. He thinks he's in there with the Etonians, he's just a useful idiot. And why did they all come out and say it's wrong and not Islamophobic?
We agree it was wrong, but why was it wrong?
Nick, it was wrong. What Lee
but why was
said,
it wrong?
What he said was wrong.
Because the Conservative Party are going to try and use Islamophobia to win the next general election. Using racism, conspiracy, the Bannon playbook to try and scrape the win. The Conservative Party now is like what would happen if Trump and UKIP fucked and created the ugliest baby ever born. Why was he suspended when Liz Truss did this?
Tommy Robinson, all these heroes fought it. And in that community, you're going to have a special election, and you may have a radical jihadist party send somebody to comments after all that problem.
That is correct.
And Suella Braverman said this. Firstly, he was projected to lose his seat at the next general election anyway. The way it's looking in the Red Wall at the moment, people would rather let Myra Hindley look after their kids than vote Tory. And rightly so. But also he's working class and they're posh. Whether you're in their club or you're just a working class voter, you're a means to an end for these people. I mean, the year Lee Anderson won, the Conservative Party knowingly stood a guy that was accused of molesting a child. He went on to be convicted, after he won his seat. But in the meantime, whilst he was under caution, they let him advise on a grooming panel. The Conservative Party, everybody. And still Anderson's walking around, acting like nothing's happened, like it's all normal.
But it's budget week this week. What would you like to see in the Chancellor's statement on Wednesday in the Chamber?
I'd like to see in the budget, Lee, is Hunt put aside a little bit of money so we can drop you inside one of those chimneys. And finally, on the day that it was announced that Wayne Couzens was reported to the police 8 times, including for serious offences, before he went on to do what he did to Sarah Everard, the government pulled a vote which would ban MPs convicted of sexual crimes from standing as an MP. Statues of slave traders get greater protections than roughly half the population. So rare to get a conviction that doing this to a woman is essentially decriminalised. Yeah. Just so you know, Philip Davis and Christopher Chope were the 2 MPs, the 2 male backbenchers that were fighting hard to get this vote pulled. Chope has previous for trying to vote against the upskirting bill. I think they both need their hard drives checking, personally. Anyway, join up at stopthetories.vote. Be a part of the movement that's not just going to get them out of power. No, we've got a new goal, actually, which is putting them in 3rd place. Out of the opposition position, in the wankers' corner, where they belong. Well, jail is where they belong, but you know what I mean. Register to vote, get your voter ID, have your say. No vote, no say, that's my motto. Well, actually, my motto is never, ever, 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 ever fuck a Tory.